That one working? There we go. Okay. So yes, if we read one verse further to verse 13, now the men of Sodom were evil and sinners exceedingly so against Yahweh. They're evil. And do you think that a place like Sodom was a secret? Do you think that no one knew what was going on there? Do you think that no one knew what that city was all about? Or do you think that Lot probably had a good idea what kind of place he was getting himself into? I think about a city like Nineveh with Jonah. It's an evil city. And everybody knew what Nineveh was all about. Jonah knew what Nineveh was all about. That's why he didn't want to go there. I tend to think Sodom probably had a reputation. People probably knew what was going on at Sodom, what it was all about. I think Lot, when he made this choice, probably knew the risk he was running. He probably knew the area he was going into and what that was like. Maybe he didn't, but I tend to think that he probably knew the struggles that they might face when they got there, what he would be around when they got there. And so that answers what's wrong about Lot's choice. Lot had his priorities out of whack. Instead of focusing on the spiritual, Lot saw a chance for wealth and prosperity. And that's what he based the decision off of. All he cared about was, where can I make the most money? Where can I have the best prosperity? What can I get out of where I'm choosing to live physically? He was driven by the physical, not the spiritual. And man, we know the rest of this story, and we know how much that ended up costing Lot and his family. Having his priorities out of whack with this initial decision cost him a whole lot of pain and heartache and trouble. Just one choice led him down a road that he never would have imagined it would have. Well, we find ourselves sometimes in a spot and facing a decision like Lot found himself in here in chapter 13. Absolutely. It may not look exactly the same. We may not have a Sodom and Gomorrah standing before us, but we will face choices like that. Probably more than once. Maybe it's like Lot. Maybe it's a choice about where you're going to live. Maybe it's a choice about the job you're going to take. Maybe it's a choice about where you attend church or anything else. You can fill in the blank with any choice. We will have decisions where one option may be appealing for X reason, whatever it might be. It might be really tempting. It might be really appealing. But oftentimes that option is not the best choice, because spiritually it is not what us or our families need. And we need to be more careful than Lot to make sure we have our priorities in line and to make those decisions based on the spiritual, not just the tempting, appealing physical side of things. And we have any number of questions that fit that criteria. Before we move on to chapter 19, a quick side note. In verse 11, this is just bonus information. It says that Lot journeyed eastward. This is something I've noticed in the Old Testament recently. I'm kind of studying. Eastward in the Old Testament is kind of a red flag. When you're going eastward, when it says that someone's going eastward, usually that's an indication that they're going away from God, that they are going into something that is not good for them spiritually, that they are doing something wrong and moving away from God. There's some exceptions to that, but it is very frequent that when people are getting into sin and doing something to take them away from God, it will say that they are going eastward. That direction in the Old Testament is oftentimes synonymous with going away from God. So that's just a little bit of a red flag that we can see, kind of a precursor to what Lot's going to get himself into, that he's going eastward, and that is not going to be good for him. That's going to lead to trouble. So Genesis chapter 19, flip over there with me. Genesis chapter 19. And Alan, would you read the first 11 verses there for me?
Now the two angels came to Sodom in the evening as Lot was sitting at the gate of Sodom. And Lot saw them, and he rose to meet them and bowed down with his face to the ground. And he said, Now behold, my lords, please turn aside into your servant's
All right, so I want to begin noticing something here in verse 1. It says that in the evening, Lot was sitting at the gate of Sodom. In this section we read, Lot ends up kind of ticking off the people of Sodom. He kind of makes them mad. But if it says he's sitting at the gate, that's again kind of a red flag in the Old Testament, in their culture. The gate of a city is where the prominent, important people of the city would sit. They would gather at the gate and sit there. So if Lot is sitting at the gate, it likely means that this is not just a scenario where Lot has kind of moved down near Sodom and he's living outside the city and he's farming and he's taking care, utilizing the good land. Lot is intermingled in this city. He's down inside of it. He's sitting at the gate. He's kind of making a name for himself. He's kind of moving up in the ranks, becoming a someone, so to speak. He's getting in the midst of Sodom. He's not just around it. He's in it. Apparently where he lives is close enough to the city that all these men are coming. They know where Lot's at, and they're coming to his house. Lot is not just at Sodom. He's intermingled into Sodom. He is kind of somebody there now. In some ways, he's kind of becoming one of them. He's part of Sodom. He's there. He may not be partaking in what they're doing and all the wickedness of it, so to speak, but he's definitely not probably doing what he should when it comes to taking a stand against it, until right here when he finally says, don't act wickedly, and they're like, oh, so you're going to judge us. And Lot is kind of intermingled with the city. One bad decision at the beginning of this about where to live has led to now another bad decision. That Lot didn't just come toward Sodom, he's become a part of Sodom. And this trend is starting to snowball, one bad decision after another. And we're going to see that trend with Lot and the rest of his story, that this just continues. And with the rest of the section that we read, Lot knows what this city is about. Lot knows that this is likely an unsafe environment for these visitors, for these men. Lot still has a lot of good inside of him. He is not just a wicked, evil man at this point. He knows the custom of this time. He knows that it was culturally, if you saw travelers, you were expected to invite them in and show them hospitality. And Lot's doing that. He's doing good. He's doing what's expected of him. He's being a good person. And Lot knows that these men do not need to be staying at the home of the typical Sodomite. That they don't need to be there. That's not a safe place for them. So Lot does good, and he takes initiative. And it says that immediately when Lot saw them, he got up and he invited them to come in to his house. Lot takes initiative to get them to come to his house. And they say, no, we'll just stay in the square. And he says, no, not a good idea. Come to my house. And he makes sure that they do. But Lot's home proves to not be a safe place either. He may not be doing what the rest of Sodom is, but he's still around it, and he's not safe from it, and neither are his guests when he has them in, because he is intermingled in the midst of all this evil. He has gotten too close to the fire, so to speak. And I think that's a lesson for us. No matter how good we might be, no matter how much righteousness might be within us, if we are tiptoeing around sin and saying, well, I just won't participate, I just won't partake, that's not good enough. That's not good enough. Christians don't just need to be around sin and say, I won't partake. We need to avoid sin. We need to avoid sinful settings. We need to flee from it. And Lot didn't do that. Lot should have run from a place like Sodom. But instead, he settled right into the midst of it. And he stayed around the evil, and he had a mindset of, well, I just won't partake. I just won't do what they're doing. But it's okay to be around them. And that proved to not be good enough for Lot. It put him in this situation where now he's having to offer up his daughters to the men of the city.
Wow. I realize Romans wasn't written at this time. If we look at Romans 1:32, commandments of God, that those who practice such things are worthy of death, they not only do the same, but they give hearty approval to those who practice them.
Right.
When Paul writes this, he equates, and rightly so, the approval of sin is sin.
Right.
It is just the same as doing the sin. And that's exactly what Lot is doing.
Right.
Whether Lot was doing those sins or not, you pointed out his assimilation and his rising in the ranks in that environment is giving full approval. They would not promote him to a place at the gate if he expressed his disapproval.
Right. Yeah. And when he finally does kind of give some disapproval, you see they're not happy about it. So you're right. They wouldn't have done this if he had been expressing some disapproval up to this point. And Lot is, as you're pointing out, he's far from innocent by this point in the story. He has made his mistakes.
His daughters.
Yeah.
Do whatever you want to do.
Yeah, not to mention. Right. He made a lot of mistakes by this point. Another quick side note, if you read, we won't turn and read it for the second time, but if you read Judges chapter 19, Judges chapter 19 is kind of a parallel story to this story here with Lot and his visitors that come in. It is really similar with different characters. It's got a few different details, a few different lessons we can draw from it, but it kind of drives home a lot of the same lessons we learn here with Lot by paralleling the story. And it's a similar thing where the person who invites the people in that story, they were planning to stay in the square, and he knows that's not a good idea. He knows that's not safe. And so he insists that they come into his house. And so if you read the Judges 19 account, it kind of helps give a different view and more light to some of what's going on in Lot's story. If you understand, it kind of gives some knowledge of the cultural significance of what they're doing and what was expected of them in this time and how their culture worked. So if you want to look at Judges chapter 19 at some time to help make better sense here of Genesis chapter 19, they kind of parallel each other and go together. All right. Roger, would you read 12 through 22 for me?
Then the two men said to Lot, "Whom else have you here? A son-in-law, and your sons and your daughters, and whomever you have in the city, bring them out of the place. For we are about to destroy this place because their outcry has become so great before the Lord that the Lord has sent us to destroy you." Lot went out and spoke to his son-in-laws who were to marry his daughters, and said, "Get up out of this place, for the Lord will destroy the city." But he appeared to his son-in-laws as being jesting. When the morning dawned, the angels urged Lot, saying, "Up, take your wife and your two daughters who are here, or you will be swept away in the punishment of the city." But he hesitated. So the men seized his hand, and the hand of his wife, and the hands of his two daughters, for the compassion of the Lord was upon him, and they brought him out and put him outside the city. When they had brought them outside, one said, "Escape for your life. Do not look behind you. Do not stay anywhere in the valley. Escape to the mountains, or you will be swept away." But Lot said to them, "Oh no, my lords. Now behold, your servant has found favor in your sight, and you have magnified your loving kindness, which you have shown me by saving my life. But I cannot escape into the mountains, for the disaster will overtake me, and I will die. Now behold, this town is near enough to flee, and it is small. Please let me escape. Is it not small? That my life may be saved." And he said to them, "Behold, I grant this your request, but not to overthrow this town of which you have spoken. Hurry, escape there, for I cannot do anything until you arrive there." Therefore the name of the town is called Zoar.
All right. I think this section shows us a little bit more of an indication of how far down Lot and his family have gotten. Just how far they've slid. The point they're at. The toll that this place has begun to take on them. before I get into anything, what sticks out to you as just issues here with Lot and his family? Things that they're doing that stick out as, man, can't believe they've made it here.
Well, one thing, he ignores the advice of the angels.
Okay?
I mean, these are spokesmen of God. They're there to do God's will and destroy that place.
Right.
If they'd listened to him, if he'd listened to them, things would have been better.
Yeah.
But he decides to take a different path.
Right. And
And God allows it.
right. Yeah.
He doesn't impose God's will over him. But he says, okay, you've made your choice. You're going to live with it.
Yeah. I was getting later to that fact that he let Lot have his choice, and the way you viewed that is not a way I've thought of it before. I kind of thought of it as a God being gracious to him and just letting him have his choice, but I think you're right. I think that it's more of a, okay, have it your way, and you'll deal with the consequences, because Lot does end up dealing with the consequences of that choice. So I think you're right. That's kind of what God is doing there with him. He starts out by, he kind of believes the angels, and he goes and tells his sons-in-law that we need to get up and get out of here. And his sons-in-law are the first ones that won't leave. They won't heed the advice of the angels. So there's a problem there. His sons-in-law aren't willing to listen. And maybe I'm reading a little too much between the lines here, but it seems to me that if the sons-in-law didn't believe Lot, if they were like, this man is full of it, that Lot probably had a little bit of a reputation with his sons-in-law about being full of it, about not telling the truth maybe all the time, maybe a little bit of insight into who Lot was and the reputation he had with his sons-in-law.
They made poor choices in who their son-in-laws were going to be. It sounds like they're probably betrothed at this point.
Right.
Because of how he described his daughters earlier. The type of young men that his daughters were going to marry were not going to apparently be godly men.
Right.
So
Right.
They had either had a poor opinion of Lot, or they just weren't godly.
Right. And it could, that could be the case absolutely as well. And then we get down to what Roger said in verse 15 and 16, that Lot, he initially is like, hey, the angels are serious, we're going to do this. And then it comes down to actually leave, and Lot himself won't leave. It says he hesitates. I just, that's an indication of where Lot's gotten to. Lot is so in love with this place that he's being told it is going to be destroyed. And he doesn't want to leave because that's how much he likes it there. Or that's how little faith he has in God, or a mixture of the two. Yeah.
As much as personal wealth and his time and energy invested in that.
Yeah, not willing to leave it behind. Yeah. And they end up essentially having to drag Lot out of the city, lead him out.
What these angels were telling him. I mean, seeing a city destroyed,
Yeah.
is God going to do that, really?
Right.
I mean, surely, if you really believe that, what would you do?
Yeah, you get out. Yeah.
But he didn't.
Right. And that may be why he seemed to be jesting to his sons-in-law, because maybe he wasn't really convinced about it. And so when he went and told them, it didn't seem like Lot was really bought into this idea, that it just kind of seemed like he wasn't serious about it, he was kidding. And that could have been what gave the sons-in-law kind of the idea that he wasn't serious. It could have been that Lot just doesn't buy it, that this is really going to happen. Maybe he knows better, and so he's going and telling the sons-in-law because he has a little faith in God, but then when it really comes down to brass tacks, no, I don't buy this. It's not going to happen. I'm not going to get out. And then in verses 18 through 20, Lot's lack of faith shows up again, that God gives him a plan to be saved from the destruction. And Lot says, God, I don't really like your plan. I think I've got a better one. How about we do what I want to do? And then I think it also kind of gives us an indication of Lot's view of sin. You know, Sodom and Gomorrah are the big cities of this area. They're the ones we know about. But they're not the only cities destroyed in this. This is the whole valley that gets destroyed with this. It's a lot of sinful cities. And Lot picks one of them, Zoar, and says, hey, how about I go there instead of living in the mountains? That way I can still have a town and I can still have some of the valley, and this will go better. And they're small. There's not that many people there. God, can't you spare that much of the sinfulness? Can't you just leave that behind? Lot has this idea that the sinfulness does not need to be completely wiped out. We can leave a little bit. Let's destroy everybody else, but give me this one little area to go and remain at. Lot is just all sorts out of whack with what he is believing and trusting in. And again, it started with one decision. One decision about where to live has led to all of this. And sure, Lot has made a number of bad decisions along the way, but ultimately it's that initial one bad decision that got him here. And he's allowed that to snowball. Every decision that we make, even if it seems small, it's a big deal. It can have consequences far beyond what you think. Decisions matter. And we better do better than Lot to make sure we make those decisions with a focus on God. One final aside here. Roger's changed my mind on it a little bit after what he said. But I still think there is some semblance of this in this section as a positive, because there's a whole lot of negative in this section with Lot. But I think the love and compassion and patience of God is shown here. Everyone looks at the God of the Old Testament as purely wrathful and vengeful, and they overlook accounts like this where, yes, God is executing his wrath and his vengeance. He is destroying sin, but he is also showing immense love and patience. In verse 16, Lot is being directly rebellious and obstinate to God. He's been wicked. He's made mistake after mistake. Yet God still loves him, and it says that the compassion of the Lord was still upon Lot. He still has compassion for him after all this. God still loves him. Verse 21, Lot again is showing his lack of faith. He's bargaining his own plan. And Roger might be right. It might be a live with your decisions. It might be a, okay, we'll do it your way.
Knows all this is fixing to happen anyway.
Right, yeah. He's got more
God
knowledge.
has made plans whichever way it goes.
Right,
But our lives are the same way,
yeah,
regardless of what we think.
yeah.
God knows where we're headed.
Right. And if we get there, I don't know if we'll have time, but if we get there, I want to look a little bit after we finish with Lot at Moses and some of the decisions he's making. And that's exactly what it is with Moses, that God would have made the plan work either way. But Moses did his part to make the decisions to make that plan run smoothly and to go the way it was intended to. So absolutely. I think this is a reminder for us that if God can show love and patience like that to an obstinate and sinful Lot, how much can he show us? God loves us. He's patient with us. He's compassionate with us. He's looking to save, not destroy. I think we get that backwards with God sometimes, that he is looking for any and every reason to condemn us. He's not. He's looking for every reason to save us. He cannot tolerate sin, but he wants to have a relationship with us. Even with Sodom, I anticipate probably that this destruction was a long time coming. They've had this reputation. They've been in sin. God didn't just right out of the gate destroy Sodom. He gave Nineveh a chance to repent when it comes to Jonah. He had patience with them. God is not quick to condemn and destroy. He is loving and patient. And we may force him to have to condemn and destroy sometimes, but it's not his initial response. It's not what he wants to do. He is loving and patient and gracious with us. All right. Kevin, if you would you read 23 through 29 for me?
The sun had risen upon the earth and light for Zoar. Then the Lord rained brimstone and fire from Sodom and Gomorrah from the Lord out of the heavens. So he overthrew those cities, all the plain, all the inhabitants of the cities, and what grew on the ground. But his wife looked back behind him, and she became a pillar of salt. And Abraham went early in the morning to the place where he had stood before the Lord. Then he looked toward Sodom and Gomorrah and toward all the land
All right. Ultimately, what has Lot's decision of where to live cost him by this point? Everything. His wife, even, at this point. He's lost just about everything. You know, all that wealth that Lot went to chase by choosing Sodom and Gomorrah, that's gone. He didn't get that. He didn't get to keep that in the end. The thing he was chasing after that led him to this, he didn't get that because it was a physical thing, and those are fleeting, and we may chase them, but we're going to lose them a lot of times. They're not lasting. Again, one choice has led to this much pain for Lot and his family. You know, we could have a debate about the level of Lot's righteousness during this time. It's kind of, he's similar to Jonah for me, that I don't know what to make of Jonah and the way that story ends sometimes. Like, does Jonah figure it out and make it right with God in the end? It ends on a negative note with the last thing we see with Jonah, you know, that Jonah is still angry with God and angry about Nineveh being saved. I don't know what to make of Jonah sometimes. And I have the same response sometimes with Lot, that when you read this account, man, it paints Lot in a really negative light. Lot seems like he is really messed up and he is really deep in sin and really lacking faith. But then you flip over to the New Testament and read a passage like 2 Peter, and it calls him righteous Lot. I guess Lot made this right at some point, you know, with God, that he fixed all this. I don't know what to make of Lot sometimes. It gives him more credit in the New Testament. I think one way or the other, it's definitely true that Lot was aware of the evil that was going on in Sodom and Gomorrah, and maybe sometimes that bothered him and tormented him, as 2 Peter says, in some ways. But I also think that Lot didn't have the strength to give up the prosperity that he had found there, no matter how much it tormented him and bothered him. Lot could have left at any point, and he did not have the strength and the faith to get up and leave. He could have, and he wouldn't. I think Lot was maybe a righteous man in some ways, but he was a man that made his fair share of mistakes, just as so many people in Scripture are. And all of that torment and loss and the mistakes ultimately stemmed from that one choice. And I think verse 29 is again kind of this whole section is kind of an indication of where Lot's at. God has compassion and patience on him. Lot still has some good attributes and traits, but I don't think Lot was spared because he was this man inside of Sodom that was just so much more righteous and blameless, and he deserved to be saved. And he had earned that. I think ultimately God saved Lot because of his love for Lot and his compassion and his patience, but also as 27 and 28 show us, a little bit because of his love and relationship with Abraham and who Lot was to him. That Lot didn't exactly deserve this salvation from Sodom at this point. He had made his mistakes. And then finally, let's read, what time is it? Well, we won't read it. We'll give the synopsis of it. Verses 30 through 38. Lot at this point, he's bargained this plan with God of how he's going to be saved, and he ditches that plan. And he says, never mind, I'm going to go back to what God originally told me. Let's go live in the mountains. And so that's where he ends up. Instead of being in Zoar, he ends up in the mountains. He goes back to God's original plan. And then in verses 31 through 35, we see the beginning of this plot of his daughters to have children with their father so that their lineage will continue. Again, maybe I'm reading too much in between the lines here, but I think how quickly that his daughters came up with this plan to get Lot drunk is telling. That they knew it would work. They didn't have to think about it. An indication of how evil his daughters are. That they don't really have much morals at this point. They are quick to go to this immoral option. And that Lot's probably not been the best father. They have ended up a long way from where they started. The family as a whole, not just Lot. And again, one choice led them to all that. Choices matter. And then you want to add insult to injury to that choice. The two sons that Lot fathered with his daughters, anybody know what two nations they gave rise to? The Ammonites and the Moabites. What do we know about those two nations? Thorn in Israel's side. For generations and generations and generations, they plagued Israel. Lot himself fathered the two nations that would plague God's people for just about the rest of the Old Testament as we read it. One decision about where to live has had implications way after Lot is dead. Way after Lot is dead for God's people. It is a big deal when Lot made a bad decision. It's a big deal when we have decisions. We've got to take them seriously. No decision is worth just being shrugged off. One choice has changed who Lot was in many ways. It got him heavily involved in a sinful city. It made him lose his accountability in some ways. He lost his sons-in-law. He lost his wife. He lost his faith in God. And it's led to him living in a mountain without all that wealth he was chasing, and ultimately fathering children with his own daughters, nations that would plague Israel for generations. One decision not only ruined Lot's life, tongue-tied in many ways, but also that of his family, and even had repercussions for countless generations. Every decision is a big deal. Quickly, let's turn over to Hebrews chapter 11. Hebrews chapter 11. Hebrews chapter 11 and verse 24 says, "By faith Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to be mistreated with the people of God than to enjoy the passing pleasures of sin. Regarding the reproach of Christ, greater riches than the treasures of Egypt, for he was looking to the reward. By faith he left Egypt, not fearing the rage of the king, for he endured as seeing him who is unseen. By faith he kept the Passover and the sprinkling of the blood, so that he who destroyed the firstborn would not touch them." Moses gets a big decision. And Moses, instead of prioritizing the physical, it says he was looking to the reward. Moses has his priorities straight when his decision came around. And he chooses not to live in Pharaoh's palace and not to be one of his, but to go back and be with God's people. And without that choice, there's a whole lot that would have been different. If Moses doesn't make that choice, we don't have the burning bush. We don't have Moses going before Pharaoh. We don't have the plagues. We don't have Israel leaving Egypt. We don't have Mount Sinai and the covenant being given. We don't have the taking of the promised land. Ultimately, we end up not having David and Solomon and all they contributed. We don't have a whole lot of the Old Testament that follows in the history of Israel. Eventually, we'd be missing out on Jesus if Moses hadn't made that choice. As Roger pointed out, God would have made his plan work with or without Moses' choice. But Moses made the right choice and made that plan run smoothly the way it was intended to.
There's a phrase, by faith, by faith, by faith. Lot didn't go by faith.
Right.
We all walk by faith, not by sight. And faith comes from God, I believe. He didn't put his faith, he didn't put his trust in God, but his trust in himself.
Right.
And we do that a lot.
Yeah, we do. We do. We are more like Lot than we care to realize sometimes. Quickly, I'll just rattle these off and we'll wrap up. Some takeaways for us. Obviously, the one we've hit on over and over again, decisions matter. All of them. Whether you make the right choice or the wrong choice, they can have serious implications. They matter. We've got to take them seriously. Takeaway number 2 is we can't let bad choices snowball. That was Lot's downfall. He made one bad choice and he followed it with a whole bunch more bad choices. We will make mistakes. We will make bad choices sometimes. The best people in Scripture did. Think about David and all the mistakes we see him make. But the difference is that other people didn't let their bad choices snowball like Lot did. They fixed it. They made right choices after that and nipped the problems in the bud. The third takeaway is that hanging around sin and not partaking won't cut it. Sin takes a toll on us. It has an effect on us. Lot probably thought Sodom wouldn't bother them. It did. Movies, entertainment, places, whatever it is, we don't need to hang around it. We need to get away. It will take a toll on us. All right, thank y'all for your comments and help.